Welcome to the KuppingerCole Analysts chat. I'm your host. My name is Matthias. I'm lead advisor and senior analyst with KuppingerCole Analysts. I have two guests today. First of all, I want to welcome Anni Bailey, hailing from Salzburg. Hi, Anni.
Hello, Matthias. Thanks for having me back.
And we are joined by Martin Kuppinger. He is one of the founders and the principal analysts of KuppingerCole Analysts. Hi, Martin. Good to see you.
Hi, Anni. Hi, Matthias.
Great to have you. And we want to continue our discussion that we started earlier at EIC in the initial episode that we talked about, that we want to have a deeper dive into the Global Assured Identity Network, which is abbreviated with GAIN. This is an initiative, a structure that aims at exchanging highly trustworthy identity information that is then used for additional purposes. So it's really a global network, assured identities, all in the name, and organizations, mainly focusing currently on banks, are called to action to interoperate, to provide these identities directly to relying parties. This is the core idea, really nothing really new, but it seems to be as if it could be happening this time. Anni, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, so it's an interesting proposal then, and it's finding itself somewhere in between a centralized approach and a decentralized approach to providing this verified identity. So it's at times, or it could be considered centralized approach because it is being set out by an organization which does have, some level of oversight and control over the processes. It's not completely decentralized where there's no ability for one party to go in and implement any sort of measures or controlling or guiding things. But on the other hand, I
think that what I like is this idea of combining the strengths of both. So you can reuse your identity ideally everywhere with this defined level of assurance, but you have that party that helps you in or you can use the identity you already have set up with a party in a strong KYC, so know your customer based compliant process. And I think this is an interesting approach. So making strong, well-verified identities work beyond the silos of the banks or telcos or whoever has set up that identity.
Exactly, and it adds a level of trust. I read somewhere around the topic of GAIN that Kim Cameron once said that the internet is missing this trust layer, and they are now aiming with GAIN to add this level of trust. And it could be decentralized identities, so self-issued or identities issued by a commercial company, but it could also be identities provided by a governmental organization as well. So we add trust. So what's the value of adding this trust when it comes to business, when it comes to at global business, Anni?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a huge value in increasing the assurance level of both the identity and the authentication processes that most of the time customers are going through. But we could envision this also for the workforce as well, for employees, suppliers, partners, things like that. And so being able to boost that assurance level of incoming information about your customer helps you know that fraud isn't occurring, that this is somebody who is trustworthy, and it also then saves time and resources in not needing to verify that information because it's already coming in with a high level of assurance because somebody else, namely here in this scenario, financial institutions have already done that. So you can inherit that trust and really know your customer, bringing in that KYC principle.
And even while it's only, in quotas, a trust level for a trust layer for human identities, I think it's a very important one because for now we still have to onboard at bank A and B and C and at telco A and at that e-commerce site, etc. So we do it very frequently, and it's in some way it's repetitive, it's annoying. when you go outside of the regulated space, it's usually also not very, very strong and very secure. So there's a logic in having something like that. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't really stand in conflict with other approaches. So it is just extending what you do internally, but it also is something which is about reusable identities, about having something you can reuse. It even can work with decentralized identity approaches, because that identity a bank creates could also be a decentralized identity which sits in a wallet. And even then, with the standards approach of the GAIN network, theoretically there's some probably in the future practically there's some ability to mix these things. So I think we are on a relatively looking at a relatively interesting evolution here, giving just more choice and more flexibility and more options to the business.
Right. And Anni, you just mentioned that in half a sentence, you mentioned enterprise use cases. We usually, when you talk about GAIN, we're talking about enabling e-commerce, enabling trust, enabling high profile, highly critical transactions. Is this something, and we as KuppingerCole, we are doing IAM for a very long time. Do you, Martin, see this also providing benefit to enterprise use cases, to onboarding employees, employing partners, employing external staff, freelancers? Could that be a use case there as well?
Yeah, so I think for partners, it's very obvious. For partners, it makes a lot of sense to have a verified identity of partners to simplify onboarding processes. But even when you look at a global workforce, for instance, and GAIN has a global focus. So approaches like GAIN or also decentralized identities, these approaches can help in simplifying and streamlining these processes, and at the end, reducing process length and process cost.
Right. So if we look at it from a different angle, banks differ really drastically when it comes to the user experience that you have. And all of them have this issue and this challenge of providing trust and understanding their customers, as you've mentioned, with KYC processes. But not every user experience is really good. When GAIN focuses on this banking identity, could that mean that this is also a drawback? Could this backfire to the banks that are not providing this this potentially very nice and simple and a streamlined user experience, Anni?
Yeah, that's something which we'll have to wait and see. So we as of yet, we're still working with a theoretical proposal and working towards a technical proof of concept. So it will be interesting to see how banks are then presenting this, how GAIN is presenting this as a user interface. But from personal experiences, some banks have a really great user experiences and some banks don't. And so if GAIN is kind of funneling all authentication processes through the bank, then there's going to be a huge variety in experiences that users have and may or may not associate with GAIN. It's going to be interesting to see also the branding, if GAIN is really going to be a known entity here, or if it's, if all of the associations that user would have are directed towards their bank. So there's questions. This is an open question.
Yeah, but I think there should be a tendency in banks also improving their journeys. I think that's a tendency we anyway observe. When you look at banks, that most banks are making progress. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but at the end they are making progress. And on the other hand, as I said, the big advantage is you don't need. So you have a strong, reliable identity, and you don't need to go through multiple KYC processes. And we all know that KYC processes always are in some way cumbersome, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they're never really smooth. And so from that perspective, I definitely see an advantage in this approach. And I definitely like the idea behind it. I think at the end, time will tell which approaches, and it will be probably multiple approaches, are mostly used for which use cases. But I definitely have the hope that we can use a strong, proven identity across more places in a not too distant future than we can use today.
Mm-hmm.
I would fully agree. Yeah, absolutely. And they have a strong timeline, so they are moving towards a test bed, a POC installation early next year. So if things really work out, if GAIN gets to the traction and to the influence we all expect it to have, then there would be a business imperative for banks to join, because it will be then an enabler for business. And on the other hand, with the customer having probably some choice, they would maybe even change banks towards a bank that provides a better user experience when it comes to reusing it again and again.
Yeah, and you know what we must not underestimate is, for a bank, that is about the customer interface, the customer touch point. So if I use with my bank the authentication for many, many use cases, the likeliness that I will stay with my bank will in tendency increase. So I think there's a clear benefit for banks then to be part of the network and to be really, really good in what they offer to me as a customer, so that I say, okay, I'm happy with this. And even when I might consider switching my bank, I might say, hey, at the end, I like that authentication. I better leave it as is.
Right. And as we want to look into aspects that have not yet been so thoroughly covered in the press and in podcasts and anything, we want to have a quick look at privacy. When I think of organizations that deal with customer data, they usually get these privacy requests, so that companies need to lay open where their information is used and for what, and even have the request to have it deleted. In this decentralized world, with GAIN being the broker or the information, the organization that makes sure that everybody knows where the right information is stored and available, where can privacy then be fulfilled when the customer says, where do you keep my information? Where do you use it? Where did it travel? Something like a privacy portal or something like that, Anni?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So again, so we don't know fully what this is going to look like. There's a mention and a brief description of it in the initial white paper from GAIN, which is describing a privacy portal, which is a really interesting offering and opportunity for end users to use. And what this is a centralized place where the user can see where they have shared their private information, with which entity at which time, for how long they are going have access to that information, what their the legal time frame for that access is. If they still agree with that, they can recall it back. And this is something which we haven't really had an opportunity to have before, because this is then the centralized aspect of this as well, where there is a place centered around the user where they can see the full list and have control. But yeah, it brings up other questions and potentially positives for banks as well, because if then this privacy portal is then associated with the bank, because of course the user is going through their bank for onboarding, for authentication, for all of these interactions with other service providers. If they have to go through the bank to have that privacy portal, then that's one more way that brand association becomes even stronger.
Yeah. On the other hand, that would be an argument for going fully decentralized, and not to extend this talk too long, but going fully decentralized where the user has the control, so to speak, around his wallet in a broader sense. But I think at least having a place where you can manage it would be a huge step forward. So, yeah, let's look where GAIN is heading, finally.
Absolutely. As a final word, I understand, Anni, that you just provided a leadership brief document for KuppingerCole Analysts, and that this is in the process of being published very soon. So the audience interested in learning more about that could have a look at KuppingerCole very soon. When will it be out?
Yeah.
next week or the week after, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
if you listen it's a nice explainer. So an introduction to GAIN and diving in a little deeper into some of these topics we've talked about today.
Right, and there's much more to talk about, and we will continue that discussion. Thank you very much to Anni and Martin for joining me today, for having a deeper look into GAIN, but there's even more deeper to go in future episodes. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.